Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We'll get started in just a few minutes, but it's so nice to see you. We'll just get set up on a few cameras. Got a great group today. I think about like 21 households. So
Fun.
We'll be cooking everything up together, fermenting together. And this is awesome. Kaitie Adams will do a more
Hi, everybody.
official intro in a little bit. Can you guys hear us okay? Great. Okay.
Thanks especially for joining us on such a really beautiful day.
Yes.
Couple hours of daylight after this.
Recording in progress.
Oh, you can kind of see the mirror, like at the top a little bit.
Some angles. Yeah. We'll just give it a couple more minutes for everybody to join us, and that'll give me a second to get our close-up camera all set up.
And if you don't already, getting everything you need in front of you would be great. Mostly knives, cutting board, saucepan, spoon.
All right. Everybody's got their aprons on. All right. We'll give it just a couple more minutes. Oh, nice, Carolyn. Perfect. We're ready. We're ready to get our hands
I'm
in
excited.
it. Me too. I've been looking forward to this all week. And I'm so glad that you guys signed up. I just got a couple more folks coming.
Welcome as folks are coming in.
I know there's a couple people that will be watching the recording of this, so
Nice.
we'll get there. And feel free to open up your sparkling water if you want a little refreshment for our class, because we'll actually just be using the bottles today. So we'll be very hydrated.
Whoop. Make it a little fancy here.
I see a lot of familiar faces. Is anybody taking a class with us for the first time? Feel free to pop it in the chat. And welcome back to a lot of folks that are taking their numerous classes with us. We're so glad to have you. And yeah, it's so nice that we are able to share this weekend with you. First time. That's great. Woohoo. Awesome. Oh, awesome, Ian. Cool.
Quiet.
Wow, we've had 3. That is one of my favorite things is every class we always get a bunch of new folks. So fantastic. We're glad to have you here. Yeah, for those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Sarah Buckman. I've worked here at the co-op for, thank you, Kaitie, for more than 11 years. I used to work in our prepared foods departments, and I've been in charge of our marketing and education programs for the last 6 or so years. And it's so wonderful to have you all here. Hi, Christine and Michael. Great. Christine says, first timers, but I can already tell it won't be our last. Oh, that's nice. I hope you do. You should come to our ravioli class. That's gonna be a really good one
Yum.
too. Frank's also new. Great. Well, we have a really awesome class planned, and my amazing friend, talented friend, Kaitie Adams, is here. We were talking earlier about how many classes that we've done together, and I think it's been 5 or 6.
Six
Yeah,
classes?
yeah. So it's well, yeah, Kaitie, would you mind introducing yourself a little
Sure.
bit?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kaitie Adams. I'm a former farmer, and now I mostly work with farmers. But I grew up in Southern Illinois, and I've been really lucky to call Central Illinois my home now for 5 years. And I came here specifically to work in agroforestry, which is adding trees onto farm landscapes. And so some of the things we're using today, like fruits, used to be grown all over Central Illinois, and now we don't see them so much anymore. But I got into fermenting through vegetable farming and having all types of seconds around. So I was a vegetable farmer for about a decade. And that's where I really learned how to ferment from other farmers and folks that were taking the scraps of things left over, and especially veggies that look a little funky and weird, and then making delicious things with them to
And
accept
perfectly ripe,
harvest.
maybe, and
Perfectly
need to
ripe.
be eaten that same day. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so we're so excited. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So we know it's virtual, but this allows us to have as much hands-on experience as possible. So we were super happy building the kits for the class today. Kaitie's husband, John, works at Sologradia Farm. For those of you that don't know about that amazing farm, it's a nonprofit based farm, really close to us, only a couple miles south of here. So we picked up a lot of the freshly harvested food from their farm yesterday and packed it all up. So we have peppers are from Sola, the garlic, the carrots, which Kaitie told me is the first harvest. They haven't even harvested it for customers or their CSA members. So we're the first ones that will be able to taste our carrot. So we might have to take a little bit of carrot to try and cheers on that carrot. But yeah, I want to explain just a little bit about the process of how this class will go. So I'll get a close-up camera so you'll be able to get the details of what's going on. At any point you have questions or you want us to reiterate something, please drop it in the chat. We would love to make this a conversation. And and then we record this, and then we always post our virtual classes on our website. So if you're ever curious at past classes that you might have missed or interested in seeing different cultural cuisines, we usually do either like a local focused class or a cultural cuisine class every month with a different teacher. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but I think we'll start and what was the question or addition?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worry. So yeah, I think Kaitie, you were kind of curious. You wanted to gauge what people's favorite ferments or
Yeah.
I think that would be really fun. So if you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat if this is your first time fermenting things or learning from a fermentation class. Or if you've made ferments before, or what's your favorite ferment?
And you can go as simple or as wild as you want if you're really into fermentation. So Sarah, how long have you been fermenting things, and what's like your favorite ferment?
My boyfriend and I have been kind of tag team fermenting for I think the last I would say like 10 years. And not consistently through all 10 years, but he also used to work at the co-op, and so we would get all of these different what we call seconds. And so we would take big boxes and we would try and make sauerkrauts. That's something that I grew up with. And we were doing kombuchas for a long, long time. My favorite ferment still to this day, it's almost a cured ferment, And that is preserved lemons and preserved limes, which we taught
Last time.
year. Yeah, and there's a lot of people. Awesome.
First timer.
First time. Good job.
All right. Ooh,
Okay.
another
Preserved lemons, Kayla. I think Kayla, you might have taken the class last year. Kayla's one of our longstanding class attendees.
That's
She's
awesome.
wonderful. First time fermenters. Oh, vinegars, great.
Ooh,
We were just talking about vinegars and how they can be kind of tricky. So good on you. If anyone needs a mother, preserved lemon, sauerkraut, that's fantastic.
I
First
do
time.
need a mother
We
for
do need a
vinegar.
mother.
Oh, fermented hot sauce. Great.
Yes.
Ooh,
yes.
tapache. I love
Ooh,
tapache. For
Tapache.
folks that don't know, that's a fermented, like a lightly fermented pineapple drink. And it's really delicious. They sell a version of it here at the co-op too.
Yeah, it's so
So you can
delicious.
try it in a can before you make it at home.
Awesome.
So many mothers.
That's fantastic. Well, cool. I think, well, hopefully you'll have some more favorites by the end. And, Kaitie had taught a wild soda class a couple years ago, and it was so delicious to taste it and experience it that I asked her to do it again. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the menu today?
Sure.
And yeah.
So I'm glad we have a lot of first-time fermenters on the line because all of today's recipes are some of the easiest recipes that you can make with fermentation. And it's also great because we have 2 really quick ferments and then 1 longer one. And so you'll be able to taste and see the process really quickly instead of something like sauerkraut where you might have to wait like a week, 2 weeks, or things
Months.
that take like months. Like good dill pickles take months and months and months. But we have 3 recipes on the docket today, and I'm going to go through them in the order that we're going to go through them. And so the first one is the fruit soda that we're going to make with champagne yeast. And this is really simple, pretty healthy, easy one to make. And so if you want to start gathering ingredients for that one, now would be a great time because we're going to do a little bit of talking about fermentation, and then we'll get right into this. So for the fruit soda, you're going to need your berries washed. And since we're using strawberries, preferably if you take at least the green stem off, but if you want to core it, go ahead, you don't have to. And then the raspberries, and then we'll need our herbs, our lemon, the 1/3 cup of sugar, and then the pinch of salt. And that'll be the ingredients for the first one. And you'll need a cutting board and a knife if you haven't prepped your fruit already, and then a saucepan and a spoon to get that going. And then the second one we're going to make is Curtido, which is a quick fermented slaw that comes to us from Central America and some parts of South America. El Salvador, like it's mostly a Salvadorian dish, but it's kind of been adopted lots of different places, including Belize. And this is like in my opinion, a more delicious, but also quicker sauerkraut. It stays really crunchy, but it gets a little acidic, and it also has some heat from jalapenos and carrots, not to like bash sauerkraut, which I still eat a ton of.
Yeah, we know you love it.
But it's like sauerkraut with
you
a
need
kick.
something quicker sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think the Curtido will be fun because, I sometimes add carrots into a sauerkraut, but it's really nice to get the little bit of peppers. And one of my favorite memories of like a spicy sauerkraut is having, digging out the sauerkraut and there being like a little jalapeno, and you're like,
It's like,
ooh,
"Ooh, a
that
little surprise."
that one scoop of it is like very spicy, but it's really tasty.
Yep.
Really tasty.
And those ingredients are on your sheet, but we'll basically use half of the cabbage, and then the carrots, onions, oregano, 2 jalapeno peppers, and salt, and we'll make that second. And then the last one do we have a question?
Actually, Molly and Ben had a question. Is there any reason not to use the sparkling water as the water in the fruit soda?
It's going to lose its carbonation really quickly, but I guess you could. Let's check the ingredients first. It's just carbonated water. So yes, if they had any sort of preservative or other sort of natural flavors, we wouldn't want to add that in.
Yeah.
But if you want to let it go flat and then use it as the water, do it. Go ahead.
Great. We just, one of the side behind the scenes when we do our kits is, we noticed that it was actually just for an empty bottle, because Katie prefers to do them, the wild sodas in plastic bottles. That way, there's no potential explosions that would happen with the glass. And you can kind of see through it a little bit better. But I noticed that just by looking to buy empty plastic water bottles was like sometimes like $5 per bottle, when I was like, well, maybe we can all have a drink using the sparkling water bottle. So
That's
so Katie made us a little drink of 2 raspberries and a little bit of the lemon, because we won't need all of the lemon for our drink. So if you want to join us and have a little sparkling water, that would be lovely. Okay, so our third recipe.
Our third recipe is going to be a chili sauce. And this is basically a chili mash, fermented chili mash that you can leave as is and use kind of as a thicker hot sauce. Or you can make a sweet version that's more similar to a sriracha that has some rice vinegar and some soy sauce and some sugar added in. And so Sarah was great and added ingredients for both the sweet and the fiery version. And we'll go over kind of the different steps for the sweet and the spicy once we get there.
Sounds good.
So that's kind of our order of operations today.
Okay.
And then just some things to keep in front of you: cutting board, knife. We'll eventually need a mesh strainer, but everything was on that list. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and throw them in the chat at any time. And
You've got the strainer.
I got the strainers behind us here. Okay.
One thing I will say, we will probably be using a food processor. If there's ever throughout this any modifications that you need, just let us know. We're happy to adapt what we're doing or verbalize what to do if you don't have a certain tool. But we're trying to keep it pretty minimal. I think if you don't have a food processor, you could use if you had an immersion blender or a blender. Otherwise, you can just chop it up, because food processors weren't really a thing in the olden days. And yeah, we're happy to utilize what you have in the kitchen. And we have our detailed recipes for each. And one of the things I say is we're all working in different different kitchens. I think like 21 different kitchens today. So we'll try to stay together. So if you're feeling lost, just let us know. We're happy to reiterate. Okay, but by the end, we'll have 3 different ferments.
Yeah.
And we might even have extra cabbage, so we can get creative if we have time at the end.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about kind of the basics of fermentation and why fermenting might be a good thing for our bodies, for our families, for our communities, and even for our environment. But we're actually going to talk through that as we start putting together the soda. We have our fruit prepped, but we realize that you might not already have it prepped. So you'll notice that we took off the greens and we took out some of the core of these strawberries. And so we'll talk a little bit as you might be prepping your fruit to get started.
And I'll put some close-ups of what we're working on too, so that you can see that as well. But yeah, for the first step, you're going to want to wash your raspberries and your strawberries, and then use like a small paring knife and just core out the greens from your strawberries.
And since vinegar was someone's favorite fermented food, you can make vinegar out of strawberry tops and a little bit of fruit that's in there. This is kind of like an intermediate thing. If you already have a mother, which was called out in the comments, which is a starter culture, we'll talk more about here in a second. These can be utilized and not thrown away, but also great for the compost. Or if compost's not your thing, just go ahead and toss them in the trash. But let's go over a couple of fermentation basics, or why you might be here in this class today. It's a very simple process. It's a simple process as old as time. And since it's Halloween, it's also the perfect time to talk about fermentation, because fermentation is just controlled decay. So if we think about like all the spooky, ooky, icky things that we might bring up during Halloween, like fermentation is one of those. It's something where we're taking something that's organic, so like a raspberry or cabbage or carrots, and because it's an organic thing, it's of the earth. Once it's done with its life cycle process, it's already in a process of decay. And fermentation is one of the ways that people historically have been able to slow down the decay process using the amazing process of acidification. And so the main sort of acidification or fermentation technique we're going to use today is called lactofermentation. And lactofermentation is basically we're taking the sugars and the carbs that are inside of things. We're using bacteria and the lack of oxygen and salt to basically slow it down, get rid of the bad yeasts and molds and bacterias and other things so that lactobacillus itself can thrive. And then basically take the sugars and the carbs and turn it into lactic acid, which then preserves the kind of like stops time. And especially if you set it in the fridge or slow things down, it'll kind of hold it in a stasis state for a long time. And so basically the whole process comes down to lactobacillus is good. Everything else, maybe not so much. And so what we do is we add salt and we get rid of the oxygen and then we take it out. So with something like Curtido, the sauerkraut that we're going to be making today, that means we're going to shred things. We're going to add salt. We're going to shove it down under some water so that the lactobacillus can thrive and really like be the star of the show and like the head of the party. And then all the mold and the carbon dioxide and all of the bacteria that could cause us to get sick just leaves.
And that salt, the salt is really important to kind of like handle and that anaerobic state and also kill anything that would be harmful.
The salt is in there to make sure that things that lactobacillus can't handle get kicked out.
It also makes it taste really good too.
It also makes it, taste really amazing and keeps things kind of crunchy. So that's kind of the main one. But we're also going to be doing some alcohol fermentation. So our soda today, we're basically creating ethanol. So we're taking sugar and carbs, which is our soda. We're adding yeast, which is our version of lactobacillus, but it's a different version. It's a different strain. So if we look at
champagne yeast that we're excited about.
And so it has the name on here, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So instead of lactobacillus, we're using this. And then we're taking the sugars and carbs and we're converting them to ethanol. But when we make a quick soda using yeast, we actually aren't going to get to anything that's like a beer or a wine alcohol content. It's more of like a banana that's slightly too ripe. Like that's the level of ethanol or alcohol that will be in there.
Unless they forget the bottle.
Unless you forget about the bottle. And then you're going to turn into ethanol. It'll probably explode first, but then it'll turn into ethanol. And then if you leave it for longer, it'll actually turn into vinegar or acetic acid. And so that's the third sort of process of acidic fermentation is the move from ethanol to acetic acid. And so that's why if we have wine, then we can make red wine vinegar. So that's like the longer term process where the booze turns into acid. And then it kind of stays at that state as long as the right conditions are met for that to happen.
And the sugars are eaten up.
And if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat that I can answer. This is a very simple overview. If you want to get into like more of the science basis behind that, more of like the complexity of how these things happen, we can add these books kind of at the end in the chat. But
I'll make sure that I link all the books that Kaitie brought, but our favorite is The Art of Fermentation. And we have one actually in our classroom if you ever want to borrow it or read it during lunch. But this, I'll make sure to keep an eye on, I'll take a picture of all the titles and make sure that they're linked for you if you want to learn more about different fermentation. And then you mentioned that about the Champagne
yeah.
Library.
The Champagne, I was at the Champagne Library earlier this week, and they have about 50 books on fermentation. Everything from different types of ferments to the process of fermentation to specific things around gut health and mental health and the
Mhm.
role of fermentation in those things. So it's on the second floor. The fermentation shelf is kind of near the poetry and the
Oh.
cookbooks, which is a really beautiful section of the library that you should check out. But I'm not a microbiologist. I'm not a biologist. I'm not even a scientist. And so I learned all of these things from working with other people, and especially from Sandor Katz, who is my personal hero. And if you ever come to my house, I actually have like a printed out picture of Sandor Katz in my kitchen.
Oh.
Like that's how much he's kind of like guided me on my journey. And he wasn't an expert when he started doing this work either.
And he's the author of The Art of Fermentation, which is a really popular book. And so he's been kind of like a mentor for those learning or kind of relearning the traditions of fermentation. And so there's some wild fermentation recipes and also kind of the traditional ones in these books. So
Yeah, and he came to this work originally through trying to heal himself. He was diagnosed with HIV and was learning from other folks that were diagnosed that eating things like naturally fermented, lacto-fermented pickles and sauerkraut were helping with folks in their immunity building processes and battling HIV. And so that's what like kicked off his learning journey. And he has a really great quote in one of his books about eschewing the cult of expertise, which basically means if you find something that's working for you and you don't know how it works, like go find out why it works, talk with other folks, and then figure out what's going to work within your life.
Right.
And so like you don't have to be an expert on the whole process of fermentation to know that it's something that can be good for us and something that we can do all on our own without an expert in the room.
Yeah, and I feel like that really connects to like cooking and recipes and all these things, it's just, you don't have to be a Michelin star chef to have some really delicious recipes and make amazing dishes. So that's what we're here to do today. So
Okay.
let's get some hands-on activities going. So I'm hoping that you cored all of your strawberries and that you rinsed your fruit. And then we have picked out our bundle of sage and thyme, the oregano, which is the other leaf I'll show you. We're going to leave the oregano for the curtido. So I'll get a close up of what we're going to do. And you're also going to need your saucepan fairly soon. So let me get you a close up of what we got.
And so when we're thinking about making something like a soda, it's something that's really fast. It's something that most of our palates and our minds are pretty familiar with. And it's something that's incredibly delicious. So oftentimes something that you're already familiar with that's really fast and simple is some of the best things that you can start with when you're learning about fermentation. And especially helpful to use what we sometimes call a starter or the good bacteria or other kind of living being that we want to use in our fermentation process. Sometimes it's easy to use one that's controlled. And so that's why we're using yeast in this recipe.
Question, wash the herbs?
Yes. Yeah. And they're going to go in the bath anyway, but go ahead and rinse them.
Yeah.
If you haven't already.
And these ones, actually, all of our herbs are from Green Pantry Nursery, which is one of my favorite local farms here. They're based out in Arcola, and they have like 4 greenhouses of perennial herbs. So all throughout the year, they're harvesting our fresh herbs. So they're the ones that we source from. So just rinse your herbs, and then we'll work on the next step.
And today we're using strawberries and raspberries, but any fruit that has a little bit higher of a sugar content is great. We're going to add sugar to it anyway, but fruits that already have a good amount of water in them, a good amount of sugar, work really well with activating the yeast because the yeast needs the sugar or the carbs to really get moving
Mhm,
with the
mhm.
fermentation process. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add 3 cups of fruit to our saucepan. And move this over
And
here.
do you want them to, they don't need to chop the strawberries?
You can chop them or not chop them, but it's going to simmer for a while. And so they're going to break down.
Great.
So for this class, we'll probably just like throw them in whole. But like most things in fermentation, you do not need a precise recipe.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I even struggle when thinking about recipes for class because I've been doing it for so long that I usually don't use a recipe anymore. But as you're beginning, recipes can be helpful
Great.
to kind of get the muscle memory and see. So raspberries are pretty easy. We got a cup of the pint is about a cup and a third or a fourth of that.
So we just added all of our raspberries.
All the raspberries. Go ahead and add these whole.
And 2 cups of strawberries.
2 cups of strawberries.
Maybe nosh on a strawberry.
Yeah. And because you don't have to be precise, you can save these for snacking or
Let's
you
put them in.
go ahead and throw them in.
Okay, so we're putting in all of our strawberries and raspberries. If you want to do that with us, or you can do the 3 cups, whatever you're interested in doing.
Okay, now we're going to add our 1 cup of water. We pulled it from the sink, but you could add it from your container. Filtered water is usually ideal when you're working with fermentation because there can sometimes be chlorine or other things in our water that are used for purification that can slow down the fermentation process. But because we're using yeast, which is pretty strong and pretty dominant in fermentation processes, I'm not worried about using Urbana tap water for
Well,
that.
we're not going to use the yeast yet. We're just going to do the berries. We put the 1 cup of water. We are going to add we didn't put it in the recipe directions, but we are going to squeeze some, was that a quarter of a lemon?
This is about a quarter of a lemon, which is about half a tablespoon of lemon juice. This is mostly for flavor.
Great.
Lemons are really acidic, so it's already going to add some acid to the ferment once we cook things down, but it's mostly just for flavor.
And it smells so good.
We're going to add a pinch of salt. Salt might be something strange to think about putting in a soda, but it does help the fermentation process and it balances out the sugar. Salt can also bring out flavors in the fruit itself, and it helps with masticating or breaking down,
like bringing that water out.
bringing the water out. And then we're going to go ahead and add our 1/3 of a cup of sugar here. And so
Wonderful.
beautiful. Which burner should I put this on?
I think we're going to do this one so that it's out of the way so they can see.
Great.
Oh, I will mention, we did throw in one of the previous class recipes. So if you're wondering like, hey, there's a whole other recipe list. I just thought it would be useful to show you and give you more inspiration. And I loved the names, and I think that this is all something that Kaitie wrote up, and it's super creative, and I definitely recommend she has the Kaitie recipe in here. Oh, sorry, my camera's moved. But yeah, this is just for added inspiration for later on. So I just wanted to mention that before. Okay.
And so what we're going to do here on the burner is we're going to turn this on to medium heat. And then what it's going to do is it's going to slowly bring up the temp on the fruit, and it's going to start dissolving the sugar. It's going to start breaking down the fruit itself, and the water is going to be released from the cells of the fruit, and the fruit's going to start breaking down. And we want that to get broken down because what we basically want is a mash that we're going to strain as the sugary, carby, fruity base for our soda. We're not going to add our herbs yet. And the main reason we're not going to add them is because if we start cooking them with the fruit itself right now, we're actually going to get less of the flavor concentrated within this within the mixture itself. These have a little bit of oil on them. We have sage here as well as thyme. Something like mint, which is very pungent and has a lot of oil on it, you can add in at this stage, but the more tender herbs you want to add in at the end.
Great.
Otherwise, the compounds and the oils are basically dissolve right into there.
Are there any questions so far? So we're basically, my mom loves pies. So we're making kind of like a fruit syrup or fruit filling. So we're just heating this up. We've added the sugar, water, a little salt, and all of the berries.
Yep. And so we're just going to let that go for a while, and then we'll move on to the next recipe. So this is something where we'll be kind of checking back in and making the soda as we go. Like I said, you could use any fruit. Same thing with herbs. There's lots of different herbs that work well within these quick fruit sodas. I personally, especially this time of year, sage is still going even after a frost.
No, isn't it great?
Thyme is even better, I think, after a frost. And these are both flavor profiles that work really well with strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, especially like the darker fruits like blackberries, black currants, those sort of things.
Yes.
These particular herbs work really well. In the summer, basil.
Yeah. Strawberry basil is also a great one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Tarragon and berries, just great. So for now, we're going to go ahead and leave our yeast and our herbs to the side, but these will come back and play a little bit later.
One other comment we'll make is that we're not going to use all of the yeast. You're only going to use a portion of the yeast.
Yeah.
So we're not going to use the whole packet. Okay. So then you can make more.
Yeah.
You can make more down the road.
So let's check in on what this looks like in just a couple minutes on the stove. You can see that the color of the water is already starting to change. Our sugar's dissolving. There's some heat coming off of it. At any point, you can start mashing down berries. These are not very cooked, so it's going to take a little bit longer. In-season fruit, obviously, will cook down faster than out-of-season fruit. Because the ripeness, the cells are already bursting with water. And so they just want to fall apart really fast. And this sort of soda can be a great way of utilizing overripe fruit. It's like at its highest sugar level, it's honestly about to turn into alcohol anyway. So you might as well just do this. And then the simplest kind of fermented sodas are wild yeasted sodas, which are basically just like fruit you leave out on your counter. It's covered in natural yeast, and then you just throw it in with a little bit of salt and sugar and throw it into a bottle.
Yeah. So like, for instance, those blueberry, when you're eating blueberries and when you touch them, they kind of darken in color. Well, that's just that natural yeast that's kind of covering the outside of the skin. So all of our vegetables and fruits, they all have that yeast covering that can end up being helpful for that wild yeast. So,
and that's, as we're moving to the next sort of setup for the next recipe, that's a really great segue to talk about bacterial blooms and sort of the health benefits of fermenting. And so the next recipe that we're going to move towards is prepping for our curtido. So this is where you'll need your cabbage, your onions, your carrots, your salt, oregano, and 2 jalapeno peppers.
yes.
So washing the cabbage, go ahead and do that. No need to pull off extra leaves, and I'll talk about more why that is later. Carrots wash, but do not peel. Leave those beautiful skins on.
Okay.
And then everything else, wash the oregano and then the jalapenos.
So you do have more jalapenos for your chili sauce, but you will need two jalapenos.
Yep.
And as a farmer, a lot of them have those like kind of stretch marks. That's just,
They're stretch marks.
That's normal. They're just growing.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing about local produce is we get to eat. Oh, go ahead.
Did you have a question? Okay, no worries.
But yeah, so you might see things that look a little funky on things, like there's some black residue on here. Same thing with here. This is dirt. It's just dirt. It's good organic dirt. And then little stretch marks. Everyone has stretch marks, even jalapenos. That's just the way it goes. But okay, so this is what we'll move to next. Does everyone feel good with where they're at with the soda, or do we need to pause and make sure we have enough time before moving on?
So we don't have a lid on it. There was a question from Molly and Ben. Can you use frozen berries to make soda?
Yes, frozen berries are great. The only thing you have to pay attention to with frozen berries is organic versus conventional. So you can use both organic or conventional berries to make a wild soda or a champagne yeast fermented soda, but organic produce as well as conventional produce gets sanitized. Usually sanitization within conventional is bleach, and then within organic certified fruit, it's hydrogen peroxide, or like Sanidate is kind of the trade name for it. And so when you sanitize things, it takes the bacterial bloom off of it, this thing that Sarah was talking about earlier. And the bacterial bloom is something that covers vegetables, it covers fruit, it covers the eggs. And so this is the reason why eggs are sold on the shelf in Europe and everywhere around the world, because they keep the bacterial bloom on it. But in the United States, we have to keep it in the fridge because we sanitize them.
Right.
And so that means that we've taken the bloom off and they're going to start breaking down and decaying right away. And then our bloom is also covering our entire body, as well as every single intestine and thing inside of our body. And the bloom is the protector. So it's made up of mostly good bacterias and yeasts and molds and funguses. And it's when the good and the bad are out of balance that we start having problems. And so good bacterial blooms are things we want to encourage, and bad bacterial blooms are things that we want to get rid of. But most blooms are benign, they're safe, and they're really important. And so with
Also known as like a probiotic.
We're covered in probiotics. But our culture increasingly is moving towards a sanitation culture. And so we have to reincorporate the good bacteria, yeast, and molds and things like that back into our lives. But back to the frozen berries, really long answer to say, yes, you can use frozen berries. Organic berries hold more of their bloom than others, but as long as you're using yeast, which is a pretty strong yeast strain, or something like champagne yeast, which is a really strong strain of yeast, then you should be fine. But I would encourage organic frozen fruit over conventional, because the hydrogen peroxide, while sanitizes, leaves more of the community intact.
Great.
Okay.
Lovely.
And now we have something going on.
We're doing good. It's a lot more liquid.
So
Has been released.
Soft.
How's everybody else's fruit? We've got an induction burner, so I always say it's a little bit different per stovetop. We have it still on pretty low. Do you want it a little higher on this?
It's fine.
It's not simmering, but we can see some of there is heat, you know.
And it's starting to get thicker too.
And our strawberries, they're starting to look like winter strawberries. How they sometimes come in.
Oh yeah, they're
in like January where they're not colorful at all, but the color is now in the liquid. So let me know how your fruit's coming along. Okay.
Now we're gonna move on to the Curtido.
Right.
So we have our ingredients here, and we're also gonna need our large mason jar, our quart here, which you'll have in your kit. And then a bowl, which we already have out.
We're using like a kind of a ceramic or Pyrex bowl, a glass bowl. If it is like a stainless steel bowl, that's okay.
That's fine. We don't want to keep it in there for very long, but throwing it together works well. We don't want aluminum. It's like a highly reactive metal, and it messes with the acidification and can stop the acidification process.
Okay.
So stainless steel for a small amount of time, ceramic, glass, great, all for that. And so what we can start doing now is starting to prep our vegetables. You'll notice I did it automatically. I remove the first layer of the cabbage. We're actually going to keep it because we're going to put it to work at the end of our recipe. And then I'm going to peel off one more sort of outer thing of cabbage. And where's the cabbage from?
The cabbage is
Sarah?
from, so we have a food hub. Basically, we have a distributor that works with only local farms in southern Illinois and Kentucky. So this one came from Zimmerman Farm. They've been really great. And it's been awesome working with them because our season's extended with those southern farms.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they have berries before anybody, or, you know, sometimes longer season. So that's been nice. So yeah, it's a really cool thing that I learned from Kaitie is using these leaves. They'll eventually be kind of like a lid,
Yeah.
or a cap on top to push all of the really delicious curtido all the way to the bottom. And then if there would be some chunky molds of something coming to the top of your curtido jar, this will be the kind of cover that you'll be able to peel away.
This is
Yep.
like a bouncer
Yeah.
to keep the bad bacteria out of your party. So that only
Yes.
the good bacteria.
So you want
there.
to set aside some of the leaves from your cabbage. So feel free to peel off the leaves from that cabbage.
And it's also great to start with the more dense head of cabbage than the kind of leaves are on the outside that aren't packed as tight, because this
Right.
makes it easier and safer to shred.
Right.
Whether you're using a shredder or a knife, or if you get really into fermentation, you can get a kraut board, which is
Is
like,
that like a mandolin?
it's like a giant German mandolin.
Oh.
And you can do like a whole head.
Okay,
and
that's
cabbage
how
on
they
it,
do it. Okay, I
but
haven't seen those yet.
Yeah.
How many leaves are good? 2 to 3?
2 to 3.
Perfect.
I would say get down to, the dense as you can.
Great.
And these are nice big heads that are packed. All the leaves are packed in there really tightly. So this is going to be awesome for shredding.
Great.
And so for those of you that might not have a ton of knife skills, when we're taking something unwieldy like a cabbage that can roll around, we want to create a flat surface so that we can protect our fingers and we can protect what we're cutting. And so I'm going to make it really safe, and we're going to put it on its back so that the stem is facing upwards, which is probably the flattest part of the cabbage right now. And I'm going to cut a tiny section off, like very tiny, so that I can have a really flat surface.
Good.
For cutting. The next thing I'm going to do is do the same thing on the back.
Take off the stem.
And take off the stem. This is hard. It's not tasty. It would take forever to break down.
Yeah.
You can do stuff with it, but we're going to compost it right now. So now I have an even bigger flat surface. So I'm going to put it back right side up. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the largest knife I have, preferably like a chef's knife style. Avoid using a paring knife or a smaller knife for this because it makes it more challenging. And then I'm going to protect my hand. I call it like you make a little claw so that if I cut myself, I cut the skin of my knuckles and not my fingertip off. And then I'm going to just come back down, and oftentimes I'll rock to get it down.
Beautiful.
And we have this beautiful packed head of cabbage.
Yeah, that's a packed one.
That's a packed one.
Wow.
Packed heads of cabbage make the best shredded cabbage ferments. Okay. And then the next thing we're going to use half of this.
Yeah.
So go ahead and take your other half and set it to the side.
Yeah.
For right now. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the core. And there's different ways to do this. The easiest way is to put it back on its flat surface. We're going to cut it in half again so that we have 2 quarters now. We have this core here. And what we'll do is we'll just come through, make just kind of an angular cut.
Yeah,
and
like
then
a
you've
V
cut
cut to just take this core out.
the core out.
So no cores ideally.
Cores out.
Okay. And then how thin do you like to chop your cabbage?
It does not matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter at all. I like to shred it. But honestly, it does not matter one bit.
And by shredding, do you mean grating or do you just mean as thin as? you
I
possibly
cut
can?
it as thin as I can.
Okay.
If you don't have strong knife skills, this can be a little bit challenging. But always find your flat surface and make sure that you're in control both of holding the vegetable as well as the knife.
Mhm.
And then what I normally do is come and I make really thin ribbons. So I'm kind of sawing down.
So we're gonna do that for the whole half of the cabbage.
Yep. And if you have a grater, you can use a grater. If you have a mandolin, Godspeed. I don't trust them. I've had too many bad experiences. But
Grating can also be interesting
Yeah.
in a good way because it will release a lot more
it will
water.
release a lot of water.
Um,
And so you'll notice that there is some water, but there's not a ton yet.
right.
And it's not super thin, but it's not like you would get shredded cabbage for like coleslaw at the grocery store.
Mhm, mhm.
The most important thing is you can go thick or thin, but the most important thing is that it's pretty consistent across the cut.
Because that way it will ferment at around the same
Yes, the rate. same rate.
rate. You know, if you have some really chunky parts that are really dense and then some ones that are really, really thin, those chunky denser parts will take a lot longer to ferment. But the interesting part about Curtido versus sauerkraut is that you kind of are aiming for that crunchier slaw
Mhm.
over, the sauerkraut that I most like is like kind of like the mushier, like
Yeah.
really soft cabbage.
And so, yeah, sauerkraut is an ancestral food for many folks around the world. It's often associated with folks from Germany or Austria or Eastern Europe, but many cultures around the world that have access to cabbage or other sort of cole crops, as they're called, have some version of sauerkraut, or
Mhm.
that's a longer ferment or a shorter ferment. Kimchi is probably one of the most famous ones beyond kind of German sauerkraut. It utilizes Napa cabbage as well as like
Yeah.
a beautiful array of ingredients.
Uh-huh.
And kimchi in Korea, where it's from, there's over 300 government official varieties
Wow.
of kimchi.
Wow. And a lot of kimchi is using like hot peppers or pepper paste or like dried shrimp. There's recipes for using like Asian pears in these like salted mix. So it's really could be kind of beautiful to look up all these different recipes.
Cucumber kimchi, radish kimchi.
Oh, yum.
So I'm just taking kind of what's left and making it thin too. Well, our bowl isn't big enough.
Yeah, we might need a bigger bowl. So we're probably gonna level up to a bigger bowl, and it's most likely gonna be a stainless steel one like this. So if you notice that your bowl is too small and you have a bigger one, I would recommend giving yourself ample room because we're gonna basically, have you ever done like a massage kale recipe? This is kind of what we're gonna be doing, kind of massaging. We need room to root around in here.
Okay, so we have our cabbage done.
Okay, beautiful.
Thick, thin, whatever you want. Just make sure it's consistent. And it's okay if it takes you a long time to slice the cabbage. I went really fast because I've shredded so much cabbage in my life, not only because I love to ferment and make things like sauerkraut or curtido, but because I eat slaw constantly. My family can corroborate this. Like, I'm a slaw girl. I love slaw. It's one of the best ways to get a ton of vegetables in there. And I also just like, going back to like Halloween, like getting your hands into like something like this. It's kind of spooky. Okay, what's going on with
Okay,
our
so I'm
soda
curious what
base?
your fruit looks like, everybody. We have a really like kind of slow heat on this, but it's really working. Our strawberries are pretty kind of like mushy. They're still a little firm, but it's really looking and smelling good. Feel free to put in the chat where your strawberries are at. is yours doing a strong simmer? Because I actually think could increase it
We
just
could
a little
increase it
bit.
just a little bit. And they're getting really smashed down. So what we're going for is kind of a syrupy, the texture of maple syrup where the fruit isn't super recognizable
Awesome.
anymore, but is broken down.
Says it's liquefied. That's awesome.
Perfect. Then I would say if it's completely liquefied, to go ahead and pull it off of the heat. And what we're going to do when it reaches kind of that like fully liquefied or looking more like a thick syrup is we're going to let it cool down to almost room temp.
Okay. So, more people are saying, let's see, getting nicely mushy. Ours look good and taste delicious.
Oh,
Good.
I'm glad you're snacking because there's
yes.
nothing more amazing than like a sugar-soaked piece
Yes,
of fruit.
right?
Like
And
screw Snickers bars. Like
know.
this is amazing.
I know. And
So
like,
tasty.
give me a pack of raspberries and they'll be gone in a minute. Like,
Yeah.
oh, there's nothing better than berries. Yeah, so again, if you're, whoops, I hurt myself. If your strawberries and raspberries are fully mushy and you feel like yours is time to turn off the heat, feel free to do that. If yours needs a little bit more time because it's still a little dense, maybe just increase the heat a little bit. We don't want to do a really large, bit hard simmer, but we want to make sure that they're cooking. So we'll
Beautiful.
keep an eye. Okay, now we're moving to carrots.
Carrots. Carrots are the next thing we're going to add into our Curtido bowl. You have two options here. On the recipe, it says shredded. So using a box grater is a great way to shred those carrots. That ensures that they are fermenting at around the same rate as the cabbage. So we'll have the same consistency. If you want something that the cabbage a little softer and something a little harder and crunchier, you can also make medallions with them, like pretty thin ones.
That could look kind of pretty too.
And so that can add some visual texture as well as toothsome texture to your Curtido, but it all depends on what you want. So
beautiful.
Medallions or shredded, your choice. I personally really like shredded vegetables. So I'm gonna shred these up. Watch your fingers. A mesh glove can be really helpful in the kitchen if you're accident prone, like my family is.
All right, we're gonna have to try the first carrots of the season from Sola.
Oh my God.
So good.
They're so good.
Please taste your carrot with us. Let us know how it tastes.
There's something so different and so special and so tasty about frost-kissed carrots from a local farm.
Yeah, these literally dug these up yesterday. Oop, ours is getting a little too simmery over here. I increased the heat a little too much, so I'm gonna reduce it down just a little more.
Okay. Carrot tops. If you are a broth making person, carrot tops as well as onion skins and garlic skins can be great to save for broth. The easiest way to do that is throw them in a Ziploc bag and throw them in your freezer. Bring them out and make broth when your Ziploc bag is full.
I think one thing that makes fermentation such a beautiful thing is it's just been traditionally used for like food preservation, we didn't have the global food system that we have now. And these recipes are kind of harkening back to times when, winters, you had to make sure that you were processing your harvest and making sure that you had food that would last throughout the harsher season. So it's nice to share these recipes together and kind of learn the traditions of people that came before us.
Yeah, and this was not only like a way to preserve, but also a way to stay alive during the winter.
Yeah.
For many folks that especially lived in harsher climates where there was nothing growing. And so this is the only way that you were going to get vitamin C, vitamin A, in certain instances, things like calcium and folic acid from the vegetables. And once they are broken down into a state where they can be preserved for the long haul, all of those nutrients get locked up. And then as you eat them, become available within your body.
And like more digestible as a fermented food than maybe cabbage.
Yeah, that
Just
had just been sitting
raw.
out and decaying
Yeah.
without any added sort of lactobacillus. That
Mhm.
was part of the equation. Especially vitamin C, vitally important, which just didn't exist except in fermented foods for folks around the world.
Yeah.
So pirates, folks in Nordic areas or places like Russia, this is the only way we're getting
Wow.
vitamin C. And so, Sarah, you brought up digestion as like one of the main benefits. And this is one of the reasons why so many people are being reintroduced to fermented foods is because we have so much digestive problems in our society due to our food system, the lack of nutrients that become available through our globalized food and processed food, and then just our sanitized world around us, where we're not our bodies aren't interacting with lots of a diverse array of bacteria, yeasts, funguses, and molds.
That's why having this amazing local food that like came from the soil yesterday is just the greatest way to celebrate this class, you know?
Okay, ooh, bad onion.
No, that's okay.
So this is sometimes like the hard part about local produce as well, but I wouldn't knock local produce because you sometimes get these. Onions are things that need to be cured. And so if we look at the outside, the skin here, it's basically been creating a barrier around the entire onion to help keep it preserved and keep the water in. And then also, like we're doing here, this is curing so that the good bacteria stays on the inside and the bad bacteria stays on the outside. So there must have been either uneven curing or there was a nick or something within the produce. And so this is what happens. So you could take anything around here and just cut it off. If you were cooking it, I would say go ahead and do that. But since we're fermenting, we want to set ourselves up for success and not introduce what could be living here in terms of mold into here. It would get killed, but we're not gonna introduce that bad agent to the mix.
No problem.
So we'll come back. This one feels good on the outside. Perfect.
Yay, cuties.
And look how perfect that skin is on the inside.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
So it's okay if we we're gonna have plenty that probably won't even fit all the way in our jar. You might have, if you have any extra mason jars down the line, you might have extra that might not fit in the entire quart jar. So we'll be fine with just the one onion.
Another great thing for eating fermented foods, as well as utilizing things like onions and garlic, is to increase your immunity. And so being able to fight off things like colds, viruses or bacterial infections, colds, flus, those sort of things, onion, garlic, and good bacterial and yeast communities can really help keep us healthy during the winter. Because our guts are colonized by all of the good agents, if you will,
I love
that are present in all of those foods. And so the more garlic and onions and things full of lactobacillus that you can eat in the wintertime, the healthier you can build your immunity towards. It takes time though, because all of those things need time to kind of colonize your gut and start helping you out. And then it also makes nutrients more bioavailable in your body.
We're gonna do
as
half moons, sliced thin. They look beautiful. They look like little rainbows.
And as you'll notice, I made a flat surface for myself again. And onions are nice because they have this little tail that you can hold on to.
I love it. And I think you could use any type of onion. You could do red onions, yellow onions,
Yep.
white onions,
Red onions are really good.
green
And,
onions I've seen, but they sometimes
Curtido.
have a little bit, green onions are more delicate, so I feel like they ferment pretty quick.
Yep.
Our
Oop, I think
Things are
we're,
looking really good. I think it might be fine to
I
turn
think we're
off.
good.
All right, we're turning ours off. This is what it looks like.
It'll break down a little bit more
Delish.
too.
And we might have to take a little taste test of those.
Oh, yeah.
Might be a little hot, but we'll try our syrup.
Yeah. Oof.
I love how quickly those raspberries, they were like,
They go fast.
they went really fast.
Steaming hot.
Yeah, careful. Maybe it's a little too hot. I did this last time, I think.
So good.
Oh my goodness.
That's amazing.
Yummy.
Okay, so now that ours is off the heat, now that's when we can throw in our tender herbs.
Okay.
And we're just gonna go ahead, so we're gonna strain it. We'll just go ahead and throw them in.
So we're putting in all of our sage and all of our thyme. So feel free.
If you don't like those flavors or you only like a small amount of those, then put less in.
Yeah. Oh, that looks so good. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with the herbs though.
Yeah.
Mhm. So we're leaving out the oregano. The oregano is for the curtido.
Okay.
So one warning I would say about the jalapenos is that they can be really, really spicy. So if you I would just make sure if you're cutting them, if you have gloves, wear gloves, or just wash your hands really well with soap. And I've even heard of washing them with some metal. If you have there's rubbing your fingers on the metal knife, or
Oh,
yeah,
gets the capsaicin off of it.
yeah, we'll rub it
Interesting.
off anyway. So
Love
those are
that
some
pro tip.
tricks.
If you want it less spicy, if you want it not spicy at all, leave the jalapenos out. If you want it a little bit spicy, take the seeds out. And the easiest way to do that is to either use a paring knife, or even safer is to use a spoon,
Uh-huh.
and then just kind of scrape out the seeds. Whoop. Well, of course, it's not going to work on camera, but to just
Yeah, just
scrape
scoop
the
them
seeds
out.
out like that.
Mm-hmm.
I find it way easier than trying to use a knife. And
Yeah, like the pith is feeding that capsaicin spice to those seeds. So that's why the pith and the seeds you would want to take out if you're sensitive. And then jalapenos, I've noticed that our local jalapenos are usually like super spicy, like in a great way. So it's not your normal jalapeno. They know they need to be spicy, so they show up for it.
you never know sometimes with the
try a little.
jalapenos.
Actually, that one's like mellow and sweet.
That makes sense because it's going to be getting a little cooler.
Mm.
Okay.
So the jalapenos came from Southern Illinois. They didn't come for Sola. And she's just slicing them, looking beautiful. We left some of the seeds in there. I think that would be great. Okay.
And then your choice on if you add the oregano whole or you strip it from the stems.
Okay.
It doesn't matter either way. If you want little bits of it as you're eating it, go ahead and strip it from the stem. And with lots of herbs, you can hold the top and then pull right down, so that you're not sitting there picking every one off. You could, so either throw the whole thing in, take this off and throw it in, or if you want it a section in every bite, go ahead and kind of chop it up. This is the great advantage of a chef's knife, is you can
I know.
rock
I
it.
only usually work with chef knives unless I'm like coring strawberries and I do that with a paring. But overall, once you're comfortable with a knife, it's hard to want to choose other ones, you know?
I actually learned how to use a knife when I was an adult by volunteering to teach kids cooking classes.
Yes, there
Where
you
they were
go.
teaching kids how to use knives properly, like second graders, and they gave them these giant chef's knives.
My gosh.
And so I had to learn how to
Yes,
use it correctly.
that's great.
Okay, so now we have our beautiful bowl.
Okay,
of
we've got our
everything that we need.
jalapeno, oregano, carrots, cabbage. Now time for salt.
So all of our good, everything that's in here right now has mostly good bacteria. We're taking the bloom on everything and throwing it in here. Although it's very possible that there are some molds or non-healthy yeasts or strains of bacteria that we don't want. And so here's where the salt comes in as an agent of helping us acidify and make sure that lactobacillus is the majority good agent within this. And then the salt, what the salt is going to do is it's going to help start acidifying, but it's also going to start breaking down the vegetables. And so what we want to do is start releasing water from this mixture here. And there's two ways to do it. One is to mix it up with a spoon or your hands and then let it sit for about half an hour. Or what I'm going to do, and beware if you have any cuts in your hands, because the salt will get in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start kneading it like I would bread. And this is one of my favorite tactile experiences of the human.
Yes.
Is like kneading cabbage. Like this brings me so much happiness. And the way that I do that is I'm just picking it up and squeezing it.
This is like a great like stress
Love it.
reliever.
Oh my
This is like we should have just promoted this as like a foods stress
Yeah, massaging. And so like you mentioned kale earlier, if you make a kale salad, this helps tenderize it, break down the kind of the fibrous parts of it. But letting it sit and with the salt for the same period will do fine. This is especially important if you need that for accessibility reasons, you have arthritis or don't have full use of your hands. That's just as effective.
And if that's the case, I probably would recommend adding a little bit more salt if you won't be massaging it. One thing that I love when making like sauerkraut, which has a similar, basically the same process, probably with a little bit more salt, is just kneading it until it's like, my boyfriend and I made sauerkraut and we like knead until it's like squishy, until there's like so much liquid.
Okay, and so we're almost like a third. We've already taken it down a third of the size.
Okay.
And what we want to happen is there for to be a little bit of liquid coming out, but it's not soggy.
Yes.
Because Curtido is a quick ferment, and we want to keep it crunchy. And so I'm going to do it just a little bit longer. And what I want to see is
like a couple drops,
just like a tiny couple drops if I squeeze.
Okay, when you squeeze it
really
in your
tight.
hand.
Yeah, and it smells
I see.
amazing.
Yeah, it does. And my eyes are activating to those peppers. I was like, ooh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what we kind of want it to look like. It looks like a really wet vinegar coleslaw.
Yes.
Is what it'll look like. And now comes a fun part, which is packing it down. So we have the salt in there, which will help create an acidic environment. But the other element that we need in fermentation is for it to be anaerobic. And so we want an absence of oxygen so that lactobacillus can do its thing. Mold loves oxygen. Fungus needs oxygen. Certain things that aren't so great for us just want to exist in an oxygenated world, but we're creating as one without oxygen. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to create an environment where this gets punched and like pushed down. And so we have water that's going to rise above our ferment and we'll be without oxygen beneath and then oxygen.
So
above.
the liquid, we're hoping that we'll have enough liquid that will be wicking from the cabbage and the vegetables to cover the curtido that we're shoving down. Or you'll notice that as the days go, as this is fermenting, more and more liquid will appear.
Yep, as it continues to get broken down and that salt starts breaking down cell walls even more. And so I'm taking a couple handfuls, put in my jar. This is called a canning funnel. If you have one of those, that can make it a little easier, but you don't need it at all. If you have big hands, it's harder. But what we're going to do is we're going to come in, make a fist. We're basically going to push it down like that.
Oh, there comes the water.
Here comes the water
Liquid.
coming out of it.
Do you guys Yeah, when you do that, just keep pushing. You're kind of punching all the ingredients down, and then you'll keep punching, and then you'll start to see this liquid rising up on top, like kind of meeting your fist, and then it will shrink back down. But that's a good sign. It's a really good sign. Oh, we might fit most of it. That's
I think we're gonna
great.
fit most of it. This is the benefit of having a recipe, is it
Yes.
actually works out the way you hope
And
it
every
will.
cabbage was a little bit different, but most of them were all about the same size. But all right, good job.
Another tool that you can use for this is a wooden spoon, so like the
Uh-huh.
back of a wooden spoon.
You
Or if you have a spice jar, that can be helpful. Or they actually make things called kraut pounders that are specifically for this.
Kraut pounder.
Kraut pounders. Okay.
That looks fantastic.
And it's so pretty.
It is. It's gonna be great.
Okay, so what we want is we basically just want to pack it right until this first rim of your mason jar. That ensures that we have about an inch of what we call head space, or space for when this continues to release liquid, as it bubbles, as it ferments. So as it ferments and the sugars are being converted to lactic acid, it releases oxygen that comes up and carbon dioxide that needs to come out. And so what that does is allows that to come up and
That's
out.
great.
And so we need a little bit more room for that. Okay, here's where your cabbage leaves are going to come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
All of the fermentation, all the good fermentation is going to happen underneath the liquid. This is our anaerobic environment. This is where oxygen isn't going to be. And so we want to make sure that our water level is above where all of our cabbage and our vegetables are. So we need to make sure that everything stays submerged underwater. Lactobacillus is going to thrive in this environment. It's not going to thrive above where it has a lot more competition
Mm-hmm.
for things like mold. And so one way that we can sort of provide an extra level of protection is to take a cabbage leaf, put it on top like this, and that basically ensures that it's going to stay underneath the liquid. You'll see a little liquid on top.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know for sure that basically everything else is basically acting like a weight underneath there. And so now we have a couple options. We need to keep this covered to keep out flies and dust and things like that. But we need to have some sort of release for when it releases bubbles and it releases carbon dioxide. It can basically burp without being constrained.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple different ways to do this. The first is to take the mason jar lid that came with your kit and to thread it, but don't completely close it
Tighten
tight.
it.
Don't even close it finger tight. Just
Keep it loose.
keep it loose. So like where you hit the first bit of resistance, leave it like that.
Okay.
So that basically means that you have a little bit of, it's not completely sealed so that liquid can come out, carbon dioxide can come out, and it's not gonna create a pressurized environment.
Mm-hmm.
Your second option is to just put the lid on like that. I wouldn't recommend this because especially if you have fruit flies or things in your house. My husband's an organic farmer. We have fruit flies in our house, especially this time of year. Other things, and they're going to find it. They're going to get in there. You don't want that to happen. And so the
Some
third
people put,
option,
like t-shirts or like what were you
paper
saying?
towel.
Paper towel.
Yeah. So the next option is to leave it completely open, and either put a paper towel or even a dishcloth or cheesecloth over it, and then thread it back on
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then I also have two advanced options, which are fermentation lids. This is a really simple, easy one, and it just has a little opening here at the top that's mostly closed. but when there's carbon dioxide or liquid release, it'll come right out the top there.
Lovely.
These are like, or at least they used to be like $3 a piece.
That's fantastic.
So this can be a good investment.
Mhm.
The next is a one-way valve.
Uh-huh.
And so these are more expensive, but if you do a lot of fermentation, these can be a great option.
And then Carolyn said a basic coffee filter and rubber band works too.
Yeah. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've used old t-shirts, all kinds of stuff for things in the past. But you basically just want any extra liquid to come out.
Great.
If you don't have a cabbage leaf or you're making a ferment without cabbage, you have a few other options. The first one is a baggie that you can fill with water, and then you throw in here as a weight, and that keeps things submerged. It's kind of tricky to then put a cover on, especially if you have a full one, but these can work really well because the water shapes to the top of your ferment,
Mm,
which is nice.
cool.
The second option is to use a lid that's slightly smaller. You could use a pint jar lid and throw it in
Uh-huh,
there. I
uh-huh.
brought this because we could use it for the smaller ones,
Yeah.
and then push that in there. That can help submerge things. Super
Great.
simple. Plastic is better than metal
Mm-hmm.
because that can be reactive. And then the last option is to use a fermentation weight.
That's fantastic.
And so this just acts as a weight that keeps things completely submerged underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And these are specifically made for mason jars. I don't utilize a lot of crocks or things like that. And so these are just kind of simple things.
Right.
To use.
So I think for first timers, down the line, as you guys start to do more fermenting, you can always invest in those weights or special lids. But for now, you can just use the current lid that came with the mason jar and just do a soft, like a light close on it.
Yep. And then you'll want to check on this every day. And you can ferment it from 1 day up to 5 days. And you'll notice as the days goes on that it'll start to bubble. You'll see bubbles coming up. You shouldn't see much color change within the short ferment of it. And you know that it's done when it tastes good to you. When you see bubbles come up and then you start to taste it. If you don't have a lot of experience with fermenting food, I would honestly taste it every day.
Great.
Just so you know how it's changing, and then you can watch it. This has a lot of liquid in it, so I would put it on top of a plate or something because it's probably going to overflow, and you want it to be able to catch
Any liquid.
any liquid.
And then when you feel like it's done, you can put it in the fridge and that will stabilize it and keep it where it's at for the most part. It might still continue very slowly, but when you think it's done, the way you tell it's done is by putting it in the fridge, and then that can last a long time.
A year, 2 years.
Yeah.
So cold makes it sleepy and it will ferment slower. Hot makes it ferment really fast. Or if you get it hot enough to like where it's pasteurized or reach a boiling temperature, then it kills the lactobacillus.
Right.
And so you want to basically put it in not direct sunlight, and somewhere that's temperature controlled. So if you put it in your basement, it's going to ferment slower. If you leave it on your counter, especially next to the stove or oven, it's going to ferment faster. But this is your Curtido.
Yay!
It's a little Halloweeny,
I know, I love it.
Frankenstein-y. And you should taste them if you haven't already.
Yeah.
It should taste salty, and it's going to get less salty over time. But that's the basic flavor profile. And
Delish.
And you might have heard Curtido is one version of this. Another version of this is in Curtido, which is basically this minus the cabbage. And in Curtido has like peppers, onions, chilies, carrots, whatever is around, but they're big chunks of vegetables that are lightly fermented.
Mm.
And so when I was in Costa Rica earlier this year, you'd often see big batches of Curtido like on the side of the road. So if you were stopping to buy whatever you were buying that the roadside stand had, you could just get a big scoop of
Lovely.
Curtido, like out of the vat. I loved it.
Oh, that sounds good.
Okay,
Okay, we've got about 40 more minutes.
great.
I think we're doing good. I think our berries have cooled down. They're probably still a little warm.
So what
Not
we're
bad.
looking for is close to room temperature, but a little bit warmer so that our yeast can
Thrive.
really.
So maybe
really get going.
does it make sense to do the peppers and then end it with the soda?
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna clean up a little bit.
So
And
as we clean up, let's talk a little bit more about why it's good to add ferments into your life. We talked a little bit about digestibility, how it sort of almost pre-digests your food by starting to break it down, as well as starting to convert sugars and carbohydrates, that it introduces lactobacillus into your immune system, which is probiotic and helps not only digest, but also helps colonize your gut bacteria a little bit and provide some diversity in there. One thing that it also does within your body is because you're colonizing with lactobacillus and other beneficial things on the bloom, it actually protects you from foodborne illnesses. And so lactobacillus can out-compete listeria. And if you've been reading in the news about major listeria outbreaks in prepared chicken dishes and vegetable dishes and McDonald's.
the waffles, right?
Waffles, like organic waffles, McDonald's onions. Listeria is a major problem that we'll see more and more as our food system continues to be increasingly globalized and consolidated,
Right.
because they're trying to process food really quickly. They're trying to do it in environments that are sanitized, but they're basically doing is killing both good bacteria and bad bacteria. And when bad bacteria doesn't have anything to compete against, it thrives. And so we'll continue to see more increases in foodborne illnesses as we continue to see a lack of diversity in our bacterias, molds, yeasts, and all of those things. And so one of the best things that we can do is eat foods and create environments that have rich and diverse kind of colonies of these things. And that's helpful not only for digestion, immunity, and foodborne illnesses, but is also important for our mental health as well.
Yeah, there's more studies. Again, not a scientist, but there's more studies being shown that connecting gut biome with mental health. And that's such an interesting discovery, and making sure that your system has what it needs to fight off any bacteria, illnesses, and increasing your immunity. Okay, so we're moving on to the chili sauce. So I brought out our food processor. If
सर ये सब लेके आओ देखो यहाँ पे
one more time.
Oh, I think someone just came off.
I didn't hear that, but feel free to jump in if you have any questions. Let's see. So we're gonna look at our recipe.
Oh, it's right over here. Then the last recipe that we're gonna prep before we finish bottling our soda is
chili sauce.
Chili sauce.
So we have a medley of different peppers. Most of them are sweet. So I tried to find you the reddest, and thankfully Kaitie's husband John works at Sola, and so I texted him earlier this week and I was like, hey, Kaitie's teaching class, can I source some of your peppers? And he's like, oh, absolutely. So he gave us like the ripest, most beautiful red peppers. These are all like kind of like bell pepper, sweet pepper. So that will be a good balance. And then we've got our hotter jalapenos and then poblano, which is like the larger, darker green. And all of these are local, so we're super happy about that. So I would say, especially if you're going to be using the sweeter variety, the sweeter variation, the process is basically we're going to make almost like a salsa, a pepper salsa, blend it all up, and then that's going to ferment in the pint jar. But we have all of the sweeter ingredients. So after, I love this recipe, Kaitie's recipe of 14 days to 14 months. So it can really last a long time fermenting. And so when you decide that it's done, you can puree the peppers down, and then you have the option to add all of these, the soy sauce, rice vinegar, sugar, and that will kind of make it similar to a sriracha. So we wanted to, you can make the hot sauce just on its own, and you can just have it without the vinegars or soy sauce. Or you could portion out maybe like half hot, and then, add half of what we gave you when it's done. So that's the one piece that we'll remember, is that the vinegar, soy sauce, and sugar doesn't go in right away. It will be once you think it's fully fermented and you wanna spice it up. So
Great.
we've already rinsed. Oh, we've got our 2 teaspoons of salt, and we've got our garlic. So I think the next step is basically we're just going to we want to take the pith and seeds out. And then what do you think about to make it, if you wanted it extra spicy, we could leave some of the seeds and pith in. Would you be up for that, or what do you think?
I think we should take the seeds and the pith out.
Great.
You can, but you can leave the seeds in, but then you have to strain it after you
Oh,
puree it.
okay. Good point. So we're going to take the seeds out of everything. If you want to leave some seeds in, you can. But Kaitie had said, yes, most likely you would want to, once you're pureeing this after it's done fermenting, like after a couple months, you would sieve it and then add your rice vinegar, sugar, soy sauce. Does that sound okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so
Great.
we're gonna start chopping.
I realized that I had chopped this without letting folks know, but there's an easy way to chop a pepper
Here, I'll show
where
it
you
close
get
up.
it all in one piece,
I love that.
and then you end up with easy to cut pieces. But I can use this Carmen pepper to show the same technique.
Okay.
This was a game changer for me. This is becoming a knife skills class, but if you do a lot of cooking or working with vegetables, you learn how to get the knife skills. So you're gonna take your pepper, you're gonna cut one side. You get really good at knowing where the seeds are, but it's basically where the green stops. That's when you know when the seeds and the pith is gonna start.
Clever.
And
That's
so
that's a farm knowledge right there.
you just make a slice, and then you have this nice thing with no pith or seeds. Put it there, turn it over, find again the top, the edge of the stem.
That's amazing.
Turn it over.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, so we'll say that again. So looking at the stem of the pepper, you're basically your boundary of where you want to hit with cutting without getting the seeds is right where the edge of the green stem ends. So that's so clever.
That's a farmer insider.
Yeah, that's clever.
Trick.
That's some clever.
And then you end up with your seeds all together, so you don't have them all over your cutting board.
Perfect.
And then especially, I have a toddler.
I gotta eat that.
Oh, it's so sweet. I have a toddler, so we eat a lot of bell pepper strips because they're basically fruit.
Mhm.
And then it's really easy then to come through and then just.
And then are we
your
looking
strips.
are we looking for strips, or we want to do dice?
Let's go ahead and do diced, because diced will make it fast in the food processor.
Sounds good.
You could honestly put them in whole on the food processor. But maybe we'll go ahead and dice so that we can put half in the food processor, and I can do half with the knife to show the two different techniques.
Oh, sorry. One bell pepper is moldy inside.
Oh no.
If it's really bad, I would say toss it. Yeah, sorry about that. I would probably leave it out, but we're probably gonna have enough
We're gonna have enough peppers.
peppers all together that it will be enough for yeah, sorry about that. Thanks.
It's the good and the bad
I
of
know.
local stuff, but the reason why that happens is because large farms have major quality control that leads to huge waste stream issues. And we end up throwing out an incredible amount of good produce that could otherwise go to folks. And local farms do things slightly differently to get more food to people. And so that's kind of the gamble that you
That's
take.
true. That's true. One thing I love so much about Sola is they donate like 40% of what they make to different food access programs. They are usually like the first to be donating. I think they're also working on the farm to school program that's going to be fueling local foods into to Unit 4 schools. So
Yep.
they're doing some really amazing things. They've also just expanded. How many acres more?
They moved from, I think they were on like 12 acres of rented land, and now they bought 29 acres. Like around about 14 acres
That's
of that.
fantastic.
And they have an amazing new wash pack facility.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. That sounds great. And they just had a celebration. I think it was last weekend. I was out of town. I was hoping to make it, but yeah, it's amazing to see. And they're doing so much good work that get all these different grant opportunities are really kind of coming up and helping fund some of these projects. So that's fantastic to see. So we're just dicing all of our peppers, and then we're gonna end up throwing it into the blender. So ooh, that one has like
Almost no seeds.
no seeds. That makes
A lot
it
of,
easy.
yeah, plant breeders keep working towards less and less seeds and peppers.
Mm-hmm. Feel free to also try some of the peppers as
Please.
because I noticed the oblong ones, those are the Carmen peppers. Those are my favorite. They also, if you like gardening, I've had a lot of success with like Carmen peppers over the bell peppers. For some reason, it's really hard for me to grow bell peppers.
They take so much longer.
Yeah.
They're different shape. They're a different shape, and they're also like it's a one that's been bred more,
Uh-huh.
and so good for commercial production, not so great for
Yeah.
home gardeners.
Right. And gardeners like me that have like a lot of trees, which is good, but makes it's pretty shady. And peppers really like that all sun. They prefer the sun. I also joke around about how peppers like kind of like to be like ignored.
Oh yeah, they like to be abused.
Yeah,
They're tastier.
they're like, oh,
it's-
you forgot to water me? Okay, I'll keep going. I feel like I've had more success not watering them than success over watering them, you know?
Yeah, they're a kind of a desert thing.
Yeah. I'm like, how did you grow? I gave you I neglected you. So, and I do have to recommend also, Sola Gradia, they do, an annual, I think it's usually just a springtime plant sale. And they have like the strongest seedlings. Like if you're looking for like sage or, my rosemary plant's still going really strong and it's had several frosts, but I've bought so many things from them and they are super healthy in terms of jump starting your garden. And I bought a sage plant from Sola like 4 years ago and it is still
yeah.
going, it's thriving, I get to like pick it all the time. So highly recommend for all the things.
It's that good soil. Everything comes from the soil.
Yeah.
Good soil creates good plants. By good, we mean full of organic matter and good fungal communities. I keep using fungal and bacteria, but they're really the basis of life and they're everywhere.
Also, as you're scraping out the seeds, make sure you wash underneath your fingernails.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've learned the hard way on that where it's like, why is everything burning? Like a couple, like sometimes the pith of can be pretty potent. So just use an extra soap when washing your fingers today. That's great.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing it the way that I'm doing it. Because it's probably not a best practice.
I'm sorry that we didn't include some gloves for you, but we weren't working with we had Carolina Reapers and we had ghost peppers earlier, and we're like, absolutely not, we're not including that in the kit. But if there's some really if there's some lovers of really spicy things, we still do have Carolina Reapers, and they look like they're so uncomfortable. They're all wrinkly and shriveled, and it's like they can hardly handle the capsaicin themselves.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, this looks so good. All right, so then we're going to move on to, is it the garlic?
We got to do the
We gotta
garlic
do it.
next.
So we're doing all the garlic.
Okay, this is a hard neck garlic,
Mhm,
also from Soligradia.
mhm.
Yeah, garlic is one of the gifts of our lives, truly. It's really easy to grow, especially here, especially what we call hard neck varieties, where the stem is pretty hard and it grows from the clove.
Mhm.
So if you have one clove, you can plant it, get a whole new garlic plant.
I recommend picking up some of Sola's local garlic, or any of the local garlic that we carry at the co-op, and then you just plant the cloves. You just shove the clove right into
Yep.
the ground, no nonsense, and then you'll get your garlic scapes in the springtime, and then you'll keep waiting and get a whole garlic to harvest.
And it does most of its growing over the winter and spring, which is nice. But one of the easiest ways to get the cloves out of a hardneck garlic is to slam it down on the cutting
Are you
board.
kidding me?
So you just go, you kind of put your hands like this, and then you go. The
Are you
whole thing
kidding?
comes out, and then there's all
love
your
that.
cloves.
I love it. I haven't heard that.
But it doesn't work with all ones, and that's why it's nice to have the stem still
Yeah.
on there.
Have you heard of those garlics that now are like cloveless? They have one
Oh, elephant garlic.
elephant garlic.
Yeah.
It's just like one big, like the whole head is just one clove, which makes it.
But
Yeah,
when you breed for that size, you lose flavor.
Oh, that's true.
So it's
True.
still garlic.
Yes.
And you can use a lot of it, but it's not as potent.
And you notice that some of these have like a pink skin, which I've noticed is so pretty.
And you notice I am rubbing them together because it makes it easier and it keeps my cutting board cleaner.
Ah, yeah, that's a good idea for shreds.
So what I mostly do with garlic is to find a flat side and then smash it a little bit. And then that makes it so much easier to then come through and get the skin off.
And so should I start we can start putting some of the peppers in.
And then oftentimes I'll also take the bottom of the clove off if I'm having trouble peeling it. Oftentimes I just eat it because there's really no reason not to trim it off. But it's easier to get the skin off sometimes.
Or then we're just gonna put the cloves directly in, or you want to chop them?
We can put the cloves directly
Cool.
in. They're pretty soft.
Yeah.
So
This looks good.
if you have any sections that look like you're a little rotted, just go ahead and peel that off.
Okay.
So it's not going through the whole thing.
So fresh. Still have those little skins on them. Is anything coming up in terms of recipes that you guys want to try for other fermented recipes? I'm curious.
So we mentioned sauerkraut, but pickles, like traditional lacto fermented pickles, like the bubbies you might find in the case here at the co-op are really good, although we're at the end of cucumber season, but we're entering roots season. Beets and carrots are really amazing fermented, and you can just use a simple what we call brine fermentation, where you mix salt and water and then basically pickle it. So all ferments are pickles, but not all pickles are ferments.
Right. So like those tholastic pickles, those are vinegar pickles versus being like lacto
And
Actually,
pickle
sounds good.
basically just means that it's been acidified
Mm.
in some way. Okay,
All right.
so here's our food processor. If you don't have a food processor, I'm actually gonna scoop this much out to show how to make the paste without it.
Okay.
If you don't have a food processor, you'll need a big knife to do this. Or my daughter has like a knife that has a
Yeah.
big handle. This just
Yes.
kind of looks like a kitchen scraper.
Uh-huh.
That also works really well.
Love that.
But you're basically just gonna spend a lot of time, so I cut the garlic up a little bit more. You're just
Working through
gonna
it.
cut and cut and cut
Until you have a paste.
until you have a paste.
Caroline said red onion pickles, absolutely.
Oh,
Those are
yes, pickled red
delicious.
onions.
Those are so good.
Those are always in our fridge, almost
Mhm.
always.
Mm. Okay, I'm gonna press these. I'm gonna just pulse and we're gonna,
Ooh, that's a quiet one.
yeah, it is. Like it's an oldie, but a goodie. All right, so what are we looking at? What are we
Okay,
looking
so I would, here, if I can scrape. So this is actually pretty close. So we want, that's perfect. So what we want is something that looks more like this and less like what's on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I would scrape it down and you'll want to see how there's little bubbles bubbling up. That's the water coming out of the cells of the peppers.
Salt in before processing.
Oh, we forgot the salt.
Sorry about that. Yes, you were totally right, Molly. I got so excited. Okay, salt in.
Thank
We're gonna
you.
use all the salt.
Salt's kind of the important thing.
Right.
This wouldn't actually be a ferment without the salt because it would just be
Yeah.
decaying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, just pulse until you kind of get this like almost like whiter, like
Okay,
lighter
now there you can
orange.
see the water oozing out of it.
That's great.
That's what we want. We want the salsa like mush.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, plus it smells good.
It's gonna
So
smell amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe a little burning of the eyes, but it'll smell
Not
really
bad,
good.
not bad.
And so this is slowly gonna start reaching that consistency. And one thing that you can do to help sort of move this along is to
Smash it.
smash it.
Nice.
And that's going to start releasing that juice
Mm-hmm.
too, once you get to a certain level of consistency. So you can smash and cut. And we're slowly, the blade of the food processor obviously does this way more efficiently, or your blender or your immersion blender. If you use an immersion blender, you want to do it in a cup or the receptacle that it came with. I
Mhm.
love immersion blenders.
Me too. They're great.
They're just really easy.
Okay, and then is it basically the same method of pressing it down?
Yep. But I would, if you have saran wrap or some parchment paper or another container, I would use that instead of your hands.
Yeah, because it will just be too spicy.
It'll be really spicy.
Okay, so one of the methods would be packing in the peppers and then smashing it down with a little bit more saran wrap,
Yep.
or using like a spatula.
Mm-hmm. So here we have, see how it's coming, the water's releasing? That's what we want. If you're doing it by hand, is that water to really come out.
That's great.
Okay,
Okay,
let's pack her up.
perfect.
Like some of this produce, I am also from Southern Illinois. So
Oh, look at all that liquid.
yep, perfect. That's beautiful. That's exactly what we want. So this is very similar to the Curtido, where the liquid's being released thanks to the salt and the cutting or kneading. And so
Do you want me to get you some saran wrap, or do you want to
I think we'll use the spatula, but I think there's enough water in here where we're not going to have to push down very much, actually.
Great. So we're just pouring the whole mixture in.
So pretty.
It is. I'm really excited about so how long, so it says 14 days to 14 months. So it really depends on when you want to start using it. Wow, look at how much all that liquid. It's great.
It all depends on taste.
Yeah.
So we want something, but when we taste it, we want something that tastes like we added vinegar to it. We want to be able to taste the acid within it. Okay, I'm going to add.
Great. Job.
Beautiful. Okay. Actually, this would work really well for pushing that down.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So pushing it down as much as we can. Looking out for
And
any bubbles.
you can already see all that liquid. And we'll want to do the same thing that we did with the Curtido. So we want to submerge it. So we can either use another piece of cabbage
Great.
to do that. And you could even leave this thing in there if you wanted to
That
use
like
it
2-ounce
as
plastic container just to weigh it
just like
down.
as a weight to mostly keep it. And if you push down even harder, you'll get a little liquid in there.
Great.
And then that will act as your fermentation weight
That's fantastic.
for this batch.
So yeah, if you do want to use the 2-ounce container, that's probably what we're going to be using too. Simple.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
And then same thing with loosely tightening it, or do you want to tighten it all
This
the way?
this one, I think it's going to ferment a little bit slower than the Curtido. The Curtido is going to move a little bit faster. This has less salts in it. That one had more salts in it. That one has a little bit more sugar. Although this is a sweet pepper, so that's actually, I misspoke in that because I forgot this had sweet pepper in it. And so for this one, I would actually recommend you can do it the same way that we did before, which was not tight, but just until there's a little resistance and leave it be.
Great.
But because you're going to leave it for a long period of time and it's going to ferment a lot and then it's going to slow down, is to actually put a coffee filter or paper towel or cheesecloth or something else over the top of it. And
I'll try this.
oh, paper towel, even better. Put the lid on. And I would do it like this for at least the first week.
Okay.
Because you're probably going to see some really active fermentation within the first 7 days, which means that it'll bubble over,
So this will definitely need a plate near it
it's
too.
going to need a plate underneath it.
Okay.
And then once you hit after the most active fermentation has ended, where you're not seeing as many bubbles or as much liquid coming out, then you're pretty good then to then put this lid on and either leave it just slightly tight, or you can even tighten it and just set an alarm to come back every 3 to 5 days for like the first few weeks. And if you wanted to sit for a long time, then you could do it tight and check in on it.
Great.
Every 2 weeks or so.
Okay.
But the reason it says 14 days to 14 months is because one, it's dependent on taste. If you like it spicier, you want a younger ferment. The longer it ferments, the less spicy it gets. And so if you want it more mild, you can let it go for as long as possible. And I put 14 days to 14 months because you can really let it go for an extremely long time. And I brought an example of one.
Yay.
Or
Oh my
two
gosh,
examples
these are crazy. I love it.
that can also help you troubleshoot any fermentation that you might have. These are almost exactly 1 year old. That means they've been in my basement fermenting for a really long time. And you'll notice the difference between this ferment which is kind of still crystal clear. You can easily tell what's there. There's, if you'll see a little bit of white at the top, that's mostly from bubbling, but it's mostly the color of what you have. Over here in this one, you'll notice that there's something that looks like maybe it's mold, maybe it's yeast strains, and it's something called CAM yeast, KAHM. And it's a strain of yeast that pops up a lot when you utilize peppers within your ferments. So you usually get a lot of CAM yeast if you let anything pepper, hot or sweet, ferment for an extended period of time. CAM yeast is one of those good agents, one of those good yeasts that you want as part of your fermentation. It's part of our bodies, along with lactobacillus. It's there to help acidify the environment and keep things moving. And so we're gonna open these up, if it'll let me open them up. Woo! I'm not even gonna open the lid. And we're gonna troubleshoot what some things you might see during the fermentation process look like. And remember that underneath the water is good, above the water is bad. So above the water, mold, bad yeast, bad bacteria. Below the water, it's an anaerobic environment. Things are good. You can kind of see my fermentation weight has sunk down there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's look at what's on top here. This here, oh, now it's gonna anything that's a dark color is usually, with especially these metal rings, rust. So when acid hits aluminum, it's gonna start,
Or like with the salt.
or with the salt.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's already started to activate that. And then we have this thing at the top
Oh my
here.
gosh.
That's basically
Wow.
this giant mushroomy looking
SCOBY.
thing. It's basically like a SCOBY if you've made kombucha, but it looks like a giant sort of mushroom. It's thick and kind of viscous and gross. This has colonized, and it's probably the stuff on top here is probably mold.
Okay.
And what's underneath here is probably a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast,
Kind of keeping that boundary.
keeping that boundary.
Mhm.
And so the water, this is our anaerobic environment, this is our oxygenated environment. And my ferment has created a defense system where it says, okay, all you gross stuff grow on top, all the good stuff stay underneath. And so this is probably also a mix of yeast, bacteria, and
Mhm,
mold
mhm.
underneath there. But what we have left, once we pull that out, is there's still a little bit of things floating in there. We'll want to take this thing out here,
Just leftover.
this
Yeast.
leftover of that. I'm going to take out my fermentation weight, and you'll notice that I'm disturbing a lot of that CAM yeast. And you know it's CAM yeast when it's stringy. That's
Mm,
kind of its defining characteristic. It's creamy and stringy. Mold, for the most part, is fuzzy and irregularly shaped.
okay.
And so now we have these peppers underneath, as well as some garlic and onions. And oh, got my hand. Smell it. What does it smell like?
It smells good.
Yeah, it
Like-
smells sweet. It
And,
smells
like,
acidic.
yeah,
It smells
sweet
like
and,
onions.
like, it honestly smells like sweet peppers.
Yeah.
Like,
And so you'll notice it's really mushy.
mhm.
And the only thing that's firm is the skin itself.
Oh, that tastes good. It tastes like sauerkraut, honestly.
It tastes like sauerkraut.
Mm,
This is a year old and we're eating it
so good.
because we created the correct environment that kept the good agents in and the bad agents out. And
Delish.
so it also makes it like less pungent.
Mhm.
And so like you can eat a whole clove of garlic. No problem.
Amazing. And it's like usually sweeter too.
It's usually sweeter. So, and I can let this go even more because I've taken I've taken out the stuff that could be bad. And if I wanted to, what I would do is I would actually wash this off because this is our barrier.
Mhm.
And then if I wanted to, I just put it back on the shelf.
Carolyn says, so did you follow the same basic recipe but without chopping the peppers?
So it's basically the same recipe, except I create a brine. So where we released a lot of liquid by chopping things up, I kept these whole. And because I didn't release as much liquid, I had to add liquid to it.
And there should be
And the brine recipe is
the
in,
brine recipe on here. Rule of thumb, 3 tablespoons of salt to 1 quart of water. Kosher sea salt or pickling salt, which works great. Stay away from the iodized salt.
yep, iodized salt or anything with caking agents.
Okay,
what
we
we
have
stay
just
away
a
from.
few more minutes. We could finish up our
Soda.
soda.
Okay, so why would you want to eat something that's a year old? Because it tastes good. And if we were ever in an emergency where we had to eat things that were a year old, these are safe things
Yeah,
to eat.
right.
Okay,
Okay, so this is nice and warm, but it's cooled off. So I think the next step for this is we need to empty our sparkling water. So I think there might be enough for 2, unless you think we should focus on 1.
let's just focus on one for right now
Great, sounds good.
and see where we get.
Okay. So, we are gonna strain the soda base, which is
What's in our pan here?
yeah, what's on our pan? And then we're gonna do once we strain it, then we're gonna add the yeast. So, okay, we've got a pitcher. You could use whatever larger container you want if you don't have a pitcher.
A 4-cup wet measure works really well for this.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Do you want
You
me
know
to
what?
help?
I'm gonna do a smaller strainer
Great.
so that's easier. Do you have a
Ladle?
ladle?
Mhm.
Ooh, it smells so good.
I know.
So now we're going from something that's kind of like scary, funky from being a year old to like this
This will
beautiful,
be like a
fresh
day old.
berry
So how long will
structure.
they have to wait for their
This one
soda?
is gonna go within like, ooh, this one's gonna go within a day probably.
Okay,
I honestly made a batch of this last night and it's already ready to drink,
great.
but I put it in a warm spot in my kitchen.
So we're just straining this through a sieve into a pitcher or larger container. And then will you want like a spoon to smash?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll get to that. So we're gonna use a spoon to smash down the fruit through the sieve. Feel free to take those herbs out if they're getting in the way, mucking things up.
Thank you. Smash, smash, smash.
Sometimes I also use like a whisk.
Ooh, that's a good
A
idea.
whisk. That's something I learned in Ecuador. When I was living there, they would make fruit juice all the time. And then the way that they would do it was they would blend their fruit up and then they would put it through a sieve and use a whisk or a spoon and just kind of like, but
Pulpy. All those
mhm.
nice raspberry seeds are.
Another
what I'm
trick
gonna
that they
go
would
for
use sometimes is they would tap the sides of the sieve and it helps with the gravity flow. But sometimes the things are so pulpy that it
Strawberries really are. Honestly, you can have some pulp in your soda and it doesn't matter that much. It's just mostly about your palatability. And surprisingly, this is the exact method that the soda you get from like a Coca-Cola is this exact method or Sprite. It's a syrup, and then when you get it out of the fountain, it adds carbonation. But here we're using the yeast to bake our bubbles and the fruit to make our syrup.
that looks good.
Okay. I love the trick with the
The sage.
Do you taste it?
Yeah. And the thyme, it's perfect. I'm so excited.
Okay.
So excited about that.
This seems like a lot of things to wash, but it's basically to make it easy to pour from one thing to the next. Okay, so we're gonna pour in our syrup here, and then we'll add our yeast.
All of the syrup, you think?
I'm going for all of it.
Okay.
It's less than you think. So it all depends on how much juice your fruit released. And then because it didn't release that much fruit because it's not super in season,
Yeast.
we're going to add a little bit of water and then the yeast.
Clever.
So that if this was super in season fruit, it would have released more
Liquid.
juice, more liquid during the
So we do
process. Just 1 cup.
1 cup. 1 cup right into the sparkling water bottle.
And we want to use a little bit more headspace, but we want to have a lot of space for it to basically carbonate within the bottle.
Okay, so just a little bit under the lid is where a lot of our juice landed, or right near the label.
If you want it more sweet, don't add any water. If you like your drinks less sweet, go ahead and add as much more water, but leave 2 inches of headspace. And then we're going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon of yeast directly in there. And this is our, sometimes you'll hear about something called a starter culture. We didn't use a starter culture for our Curtido or our chili paste because we're creating the culture through the process, the lactobacillus. But sometimes you'll use a starter culture, which is yeast for here, or you might add a starter culture to something like kombucha, that's the SCOBY, or you can do it through what we call backslopping, which is taking some ferment and adding it to the next ferment.
That's such a ugly word.
Backslopping, I know. But it basically gets the party started. It gets the good agents in there.
So would you recommend, could you do that for their future drink? Like say they wanted to use a little bit of this into the next.
You could do that,
soda.
although yeast is pretty short-lived.
Right, the champagne yeast dies.
It dies pretty quick, but you could do that for Curtido. If you wanted to do it even faster, just take a little liquid out the top, throw it in the next batch, and it'll ferment even faster.
So that's how they have, the same thing goes for like sourdoughs. That's how they have like the 100-year-old sourdoughs, because they're using portions from the previous recipe.
Just stay alive. They're a living being.
Right.
You should give them a name.
I know. My boyfriend did. And he would like tell it nice things, and it always would, like for his breads, it would turn out. And then one time he said some mean things, and he was like, wow, this is it like it didn't look well. It did not look good afterwards. Like he was doing that whole water science experiment of like telling nice things to it. So you're going to be a delicious drink later.
You're going to do great.
So most likely you'll be ready to drink tomorrow, or you could let it go for a couple more days. How would you say? Like 3 days at the most?
3 days at the most, and it'll tell you when it's ready. And so you'll notice that we mix it up, and if you push it in, there's a lot of give to it. This I started yesterday, and when I push it,
oh my gosh, you cannot at all.
It's hard.
So this is like, you can go in probably like an inch or so. This one you can barely get. So should we try it?
We should try it. And so the reason we use plastic instead of glass flip top bottles is because this can explode. And you'd much rather have it explode with a cap coming off of it than to have it explode and shards of glass go everywhere, because it basically becomes a bomb. And so this one you'll want to store, I would store it somewhere you can keep an eye on it, like on your counter, and then just
keep trying to push into the bottle. So again, you want to make sure that there's enough space, but with the amount that we gave you, it looks like there's plenty
of space. And you can tip it every once in a while if you want to.
Great.
Okay, so store
you'll-
that somewhere.
So we used 1/8 of a teaspoon of the yeast, which means that you can just fold that champagne yeast up and keep it in the fridge or keep it out.
If you're not going to use it quickly, keep it in the fridge. If you plan to use it like in the next week,
Great.
and it's winter, you can keep it.
Okay.
Keep it out. Okay, so
Yay!
let's see what it sounds like. Just like regular soda.
Lovely.
Cap comes off. I just use, this is a raspberry thyme one.
Oh, yeah.
So I just did raspberry and thyme. And then this is what it looks like when you pour it in.
So good. And
So
it
you'll
has
see it
like
fizz,
little oh yeah.
and it has some little chunks because I don't mind it chunky.
You know, and I don't normally like soda. Like I was always the kid that never really drank like Coca-Cola. And so I'm so excited. This is the one that I really enjoyed from like your previous class. So cheers,
Cheers.
everybody.
And this is great to make with kids too, and can be really celebratory. And the kids
Mm.
love to squeeze the bottles.
Oh my gosh. So good.
Yeah, the
Wow.
little tart from the raspberries
Oh, I'm so excited for this. Well,
and just slightly fizzy.
we want to be respectful of your time. Went a little bit over.
Oh, we did?
But
oh,
oh no, we went 7 minutes. Thank you guys for joining. We're so happy to have done this with you, and we'll leave it open for any Q&A, or if there's any things that have been inspiring that you're wanting to make, like if any of you are wanting to make a sauerkraut or kimchi or kombucha, we're happy to answer any questions about those things, or talk about Crocs. There's a bunch more that you can that I can learn, and you know that there is to learn, and all these different cultural recipes. So definitely welcome any of that. But thank you guys so much for sharing your Saturday with us and
thank you.
fermenting. So
Cheers to each of you.
cheers to you. And we'll I'm so excited for you guys to try the soda tomorrow or the next day.
And let us know how your ferments turn out. And you can always let us know what questions we have. Ooh, those look great.
If anyone wants a vinegar mother, I have red wine or I have apple cider. The
Ooh.
red wine looks like liver. It's disgusting.
That sounds amazing, Carolyn.
Yes, I would
It's a
actually.
while to get them, but now I can't throw them away because
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, I've always wanted to make the red wine vinegar. I haven't done that yet. So I would love one.
well, you have my email address. I'm happy to
Okay.
do some
I always fail at making vinegar too, so maybe I just didn't have a good enough mother.
Uh-huh.
Oh. Once they get going, it's easy.
That's amazing. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed it for the first for those of you fermenting for the first time or joining us for the first time. And a special thanks to everybody who keeps coming back each month. We're going to be doing a sorry, I'm losing my words. A ravioli virtual cooking class in a couple weeks. It'll be myself and Anna Barnes, who is the kitchen manager at Jubilee Cafe. She was also like a long time pastry baker, and she actually started. She was also a coworker here at the co-op, and she led a lot of the education programs before I was here. And she's amazing. She's really knowledgeable. But she runs the community feeding center or soup kitchen, Jubilee Cafe. And so she'll be teaching how to make raviolis. We're going to be stuffing it with filling it with local butternut squash and ricotta.
Oh my God.
And then doing a sage butter sauce. So it's going to be really delicious. You'll learn how to make pasta, and then you'll have a meal for two at the end of the meal. So definitely recommend it. We're also donating all of the proceeds from the classes to Jubilee Cafe. They have been feeding hundreds of people. They focus on Monday night dinners. So if you're around campus area, I believe it's like 3rd Street, off of 3rd Street in Green, but it's with the Universalist church there, and they do a lot for food access and hunger programs. So definitely recommend coming for that class. It'll be really good. And who doesn't love ravioli? So, and then yeah, you keep up. You can keep updated with any classes that we do through our email or through social media. So we're so glad. We hope you guys join us for more classes. And thank you, Kaitie.
Thank you, Sarah.
For
So much
sharing your
fun.
knowledge. And it's so fun to do this together. It's one of the favorite things about this job is I get to cook with you all and share these recipes together. So thank you guys so much. And everybody says thanks.
Thank
And
you.
you gonna taste these? You two make a great team.
Yeah,
we do.
more to come.
We do. More to come. And we're always looking for different cultural cuisines instructors. So please consider reaching out to me if you're ever interested in teaching like your family's recipes. We like to incorporate classes taught by community members, and some of our best, most popular classes are diverse cultural cuisines. So keep that in mind, and we will let you guys go. But if you do want, I would recommend definitely keep us posted. We'll do I'll let you know again that the soda can be checked the next day. Keep an eye on your soda, probably no more than 3 days. You might want to, it's really, really good now, and it's only been just a day. And then your kraut can go, or your curtido can go for maybe
3 to 5 days.
3 to 5 days, but recommend tasting it as you go and figure out what your preference is for that. And then keep an eye on your chili sauce, and feel free to, the next steps after this, after you're done, you feel like it's done and fermented enough, is to puree it and then add in your sweet soy sauce, sugar, vinegar, if you want that for like a sriracha like flavor. But yeah. Thank you guys so much. We'll let you have a good rest of your weekend, and I'll send the recording, and we'll be posting the recipes back online. So if you ever want to refer to those, also just search for Kaitie Adams' name on our website, and it'll bring up all the other classes that we've done with Kaitie. So there's a bunch of them. So thank you guys so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Happy fermenting.
Okay, bye.